The grand hall of Moonspire Keep glittered with 1,000 candles, their flames casting dancing shadows across marble floors, polished to mirror brightness. Kira Ashlyn pressed herself against the corridor wall outside the massive oak doors, her worn servant's dress a stark contrast to the opulence beyond. She shouldn't be here. Omegas weren't permitted anywhere near the rejection ceremony, but her curiosity, and perhaps something deeper, something she couldn't name, had drawn her like a moth to flame. "Another one?" a guard muttered to his companion, both too focused on the spectacle inside to notice her. "That's what? The 100th woman he's turned away?" Through the narrow gap in the doors, Kira could see him. Alpha King Theron Valdris stood upon the raised dais, his presence commanding even in stillness. He was everything the stories claimed: tall, broad-shouldered, with jet-black hair that caught the candlelight, and eyes like molten silver that seemed to pierce through pretense and flesh alike. But it was the coldness in those eyes that made her breath catch, the absolute emptiness. Before him knelt Lady Selene Voreth, arguably the most beautiful woman in Silvercrest Kingdom. Her golden hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, her dress worth more than Kira would earn in 10 lifetimes. She was everything an Alpha King's mate should be: noble-born, powerful, exquisite. "I offer myself as your mate and Luna Queen," Selene announced, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "My bloodline is pure, my family's land's extensive, my—" "No." Theron's voice cut through her words like a blade through silk. Single syllable. Absolute. Gasps rippled through the assembled nobles. This was the way it had gone for 3 years now, ever since Theron had taken the throne at 25. Every eligible woman in the kingdom and beyond had been paraded before him, all rejected. Always the same single word. No explanation. No mercy. Selene's face flushed crimson. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. My credentials are impeccable. The Moon Goddess herself would approve." "The Moon Goddess," Theron interrupted, his tone flat and emotionless, "can keep her opinions to herself. As can you. I have spoken. Leave." The lady staggered to her feet, humiliation written across her perfect features. As she passed, Kira caught the scent of her rage, bitter and sharp. Selene's gaze swept the corridor, landing briefly on Kira. The look promised retribution, though for what? Kira couldn't fathom. She was nobody. Invisible. Inside the hall, Theron's beta, Dax Kale, stepped forward. Even from her hiding spot, Kira could see the concern etched on his weathered face. "Your Majesty, the council grows restless. It's been 3 years. The kingdom needs an heir. They're beginning to whisper that perhaps you're incapable of bonding." Something flickered across Theron's face, too quick for Kira to identify. "Let them whisper. I will not take a mate I do not choose." "Then choose." Dax's frustration broke through his usual deference. "Any of these women would serve admirably. The kingdom's stability depends on—" "The kingdom." Theron's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast room. "Survived for centuries before me. It will endure." Kira found herself leaning closer, drawn by something in his voice. Beneath the ice, beneath the arrogance, she heard pain, loneliness. She must be imagining it. Alpha Kings didn't feel such things, especially not ones who rejected every woman who came before them. "If there are no other candidates," Theron began, turning to leave the dais, "there's one more, Your Majesty." Corvus Dane materialized from the shadows like smoke given form. The royal advisor moved with predatory grace, his dark eyes glittering with something Kira instinctively distrusted. She'd seen him before, during his rare visits to the Hollows, the slum district where she lived. He always wore that same slight smile, as if he found the suffering of others amusing. Theron's expression darkened. I gave no permission for additional candidates tonight. A mere formality, Corvus replied smoothly. This one is special. Found in the hollows, unclaimed, unwanted. I thought perhaps your majesty might appreciate the novelty. Kira's blood ran cold as two guards entered, dragging a struggling girl between them, her younger sister, Lyra. No, Kira breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. Lyra couldn't be more than 17, her honey-brown hair tangled, her dress, Kira's spare dress, torn at the shoulder. Terror painted her young face as she was forced to her knees before the Alpha King. What is this? Theron's voice cracked like a whip. She's a child. She's of age by kingdom law, Corvus countered. 17. Omega class, of course, but pure, nonetheless. I thought your majesty might find her innocence appealing, given your rejection of more worldly women. The implication in his tone made Kira's stomach turn. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Lyra shook like a leaf, unable to even raise her gaze to the Alpha King. This is obscene, Dax protested. She's clearly terrified. This isn't how. The law permits any unmated female to be presented, Corvus interrupted. Or does the beta question the law? Kira watched Theron's face, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his hands clenched at his sides. For a moment she thought he might strike Corvus. Then his expression smoothed into that terrible blank mask. You waste my time with this farce, Theron declared coldly. She's beneath consideration. Remove her. Beneath consideration. The words echoed in Kira's ears. She'd heard them before, countless times. Omegas were always beneath consideration. Too weak, too common, too worthless. It was the way of things, had been for centuries. She should be relieved that Lyra would be sent away, back to safety. But looking at her sister's face, at the crushing humiliation written there, at the way Corvus smiled as if this had been his intention all along, to break them both, something inside Kira snapped. She didn't remember deciding to move. One moment she was pressed against the wall. The next she was striding through those massive oak doors, her worn shoes echoing loudly in the sudden silence. She's not beneath anything, Kira heard herself say, her voice ringing clear despite the terror coursing through her veins. And neither are you worthy to judge her, Alpha King or not. The entire hall froze. A servant, an Omega, had not only entered the sacred rejection ceremony uninvited, but had dared to speak, to challenge, to defy. Theron's quicksilver gaze locked onto hers, and Kira felt the impact like a physical blow. Power radiated from him, ancient and overwhelming, pressing against her, until her knees threatened to buckle. She'd never been this close to an alpha before, let alone the Alpha King. Every instinct screamed at her to lower her eyes, to submit, to beg forgiveness. Instead, she lifted her chin higher. You reject woman after woman, Kira continued, her voice shaking now but determined. Noble, beautiful, powerful women who would give anything to stand at your side. And why? Because you're too proud? Too cold? Too broken to let anyone in? Gasps erupted around her. Someone, probably Dax, made a strangled sound of horror. Corvus's smile widened, as if this too was part of some grand design. But Kira only had eyes for Theron. She watched emotions flicker across his face faster than she could name them. Shock, rage, and something else. Something that made her breath catch. Recognition. My sister came here because she was dragged, Kira continued, softer now, taking a step closer despite every rational thought telling her to run. But I'm here by choice. So here's your novelty, Your Majesty. An Omega who doesn't want to be your mate, doesn't want your crown, and isn't afraid to tell you that you're a coward." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Theron descended from the dais in 3 long strides. He was massive up close, towering over her, his scent, pine and winter frost and something wild, overwhelming her senses. When he stopped just inches away, Kira could see gold flecks in those argent eyes, could see the pulse hammering at his throat that betrayed he wasn't as unaffected as he appeared. "You dare," he whispered, the words meant only for her, "to call me coward?" "I dare," Kira whispered back, though her whole body trembled now, "because it's true." For one endless moment they simply stared at each other. The hall had gone so quiet Kira could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then Theron's hand rose, and she braced for the strike that would end her life. Instead, his fingers, calloused, gentle, touched her cheek. The world exploded. Pain and pleasure, fire and ice, eternity compressed into a single instant. Kira felt something inside her chest tear open and reform, felt invisible chains snap into place, felt Theron's gasp mirror her own as they both staggered. The bond, the mate bond. It had snapped into place between an Alpha King and an Omega nobody. The impossible had just become inevitable. Theron's eyes, wide with shock and horror, met hers one last time before he jerked his hand away as if she'd burned him. "No," he breathed. Then louder, his voice raw with something between fury and despair. "No!" And Kira, standing in the center of the grand hall with every eye upon her and the mate bond singing between them like a living thing, realized she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. The guards seized Kira before she could process what had happened. Strong hands gripped her arms, hauling her backward even as her entire body screamed to stay close to Theron. The mate bond. She could feel it now. A golden thread connecting her heart to his, pulled taut, and the separation sent agony lancing through her chest. "Wait," she gasped, but the guards weren't listening. They dragged her toward the doors while the assembled nobles erupted into chaos. "Did you see? The bond actually formed with an Omega. Impossible. The moon goddess has made her choice. This is an abomination." Through it all, Kira kept her gaze fixed on Theron. He stood frozen on the dais, his face a mask of shock that was rapidly transforming into something darker. His hands were clenched at his sides, his whole body rigid as if fighting some internal battle. Their eyes met across the hall, and Kira felt the mate bond blaze between them. For just an instant, his walls crumbled, and she glimpsed what lay beneath, a maelstrom of emotion so intense it stole her breath. Longing, terror, rage, and something that looked almost like relief. Then his expression shuttered completely. "Take her to the holding cells," Theron commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion, as if the bond between them didn't exist, as if she were nothing. "Charge her with trespassing, disruption of sacred ceremony, and disrespect to the crown." The words struck like physical blows. Kira's vision blurred, whether from tears or the pain of his rejection, she couldn't tell. The guards yanked her through the doors, but not before she saw Corvus lean close to Theron, whispering something that made the Alpha King's jaw clench. The corridors of Moonspire Keep blurred past. Down marble staircases through increasingly narrow passages, until finally they reached the dungeons. The air here was damp and cold, smelling of mold and despair. The guards threw her into a cell with such force she stumbled, catching herself against the rough stone wall. The door clanged shut with a finality that made her flinch. "Kira!" Lyra's voice echoed from somewhere nearby. "Kira, where are you?" "I'm here," Kira called back, her voice cracking. "I'm okay. Are you hurt?" "They put me 3 cells down. What happened? What did you do?" Everyone's saying. Lyra's words dissolved into sobs. They're saying you formed a mate bond with the Alpha King. But that can't be true. That's impossible. You're Omega, you can't. I don't know what happened, Kira interrupted, sliding down the wall until she sat on the cold stone floor. Her whole body ached, but it wasn't from the rough treatment. It was the bond, stretched thin by distance and rejection. Every cell in her body screamed to go to Theron, to be near him, to complete what had started. But he didn't want her. He'd made that devastatingly clear. Kira wrapped her arms around herself, trying to contain the pain radiating through her chest. This was worse than anything she'd imagined. She'd heard stories of rejected mate bonds, of course. They were cautionary tales told to young wolves about the dangers of defying the goddess's will. But she'd never truly understood until now. It felt like dying. Hours passed in darkness. Kira drifted in and out of consciousness, her body trying to cope with the dual assault of the new bond and its immediate rejection. She was dimly aware of Lyra calling to her, of other prisoners muttering, of guards changing shifts. None of it seemed real. Then she heard footsteps, different from the guards' heavy boots. Lighter, purposeful. The cell door opened. Kira's head jerked up, hope flaring painfully bright in her chest. But it wasn't Theron. A woman stood in the doorway, elderly but upright, with steel-gray hair braided crown-like around her head. She wore simple robes marked with the symbol of the royal healers. "My name is Marin," the woman stated, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm here to examine you." "I'm not injured," Kira replied automatically. "No," Marin agreed, stepping into the cell. "But you are bonded to an Alpha King who is currently tearing his private chambers apart in rage." She knelt beside Kira with surprising grace for her age. "May I?" Too exhausted to protest, Kira nodded. Marin's hands were cool and professional as she checked Kira's pulse, peered into her eyes, placed a palm over her heart. The healer's expression grew troubled. "How long has it been since the bond formed?" Marin asked. 4 hours? 5? I've lost track. "And in that time, has he come to you? Acknowledged the bond in any way?" Kira let out a bitter laugh. "He ordered me thrown in a cell." "Does that count?" Marin's lips pressed into a thin line. "Foolish boy," she muttered. "Absolutely foolish." She met Kira's stare, and Kira saw genuine concern there. "Child, do you understand what you've done? The bond between an Alpha King and his true mate is not like ordinary bonds. It's ancient, powerful, and demands completion." "He doesn't want me," Kira stated flatly. "So I guess the bond will just have to be disappointed." "It's not that simple. The bond will kill you both if it's not completed within the moon cycle. The Alpha King knows this. He's known since the moment it snapped into place." Marin's look was steady, unflinching. "And yet, he fights it anyway." The words settled over Kira like a shroud. She'd barely survived 4 hours of this agony. 4 weeks would destroy her. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why does he reject everyone? What's wrong with him? Marin was quiet for so long Kira thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "That's his story to tell, not mine. But I will say this. Theron Valdris is the most powerful Alpha King our kingdom has seen in generations, and the most damaged." Before Kira could ask what she meant, raised voices echoed from the corridor. Marin stood quickly, placing herself between Kira and the door. Corvus Dane appeared in the doorway, his smile as cold as a blade. Behind him stood 2 guards, but these weren't the regular dungeon guards. These wore the black uniforms of the Enforcement Corps. "The healer's examination is complete," Corvus announced pleasantly. "You may leave, Marin." "I'm not finished." "You are." The words were silk over steel. "The Alpha King has made his decision regarding the Omega's fate." Kira pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the way her legs shook. What decision? Corvus's smile widened. His Majesty, in his infinite wisdom, has determined that the bond was formed through witchcraft. Dark magic designed to trap him into a false mating. He paused, savoring the moment. You are hereby charged with treason against the crown, the penalty for which is death. The world tilted. Death. For a bond she hadn't asked for, hadn't wanted, couldn't control. That's absurd, Marin protested. The mate bond cannot be faked or forced. It's the goddess's will. The goddess, Corvus interrupted smoothly, does not mate alpha kings with omega trash. Clearly, darker forces are at work, and they will be purged. His stare glittered with malicious satisfaction as it fixed on Kira. Your execution is scheduled for dawn, 3 days from now. Plenty of time for the Alpha King to find a way to sever this unfortunate connection. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and your sister? She'll be watching from the front row. I want to make sure she understands the price of defiance. The door slammed shut, leaving Kira alone with Marin and the crushing weight of her death sentence. No, Marin breathed, her face stricken. This isn't right. This isn't how. A sound cut through her words. Low, anguished, barely human. It took Kira a moment to realize it was coming from her own throat. The mate bond flared with agonizing intensity, and she knew that somewhere in Moonspire Keep, Theron felt it too. He was condemning them both, and for the first time since entering that hall, Kira wondered if her defiance had been courage or simply the worst mistake of her life. Theron's private chambers looked like a battlefield. Furniture lay overturned, curtains torn from windows, bottles shattered against marble floors. He stood in the center of the destruction, chest heaving, his hands still clenched into fists that had punched holes through walls built to withstand siege. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough to quiet the bond screaming in his chest. Your Majesty. Dax stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral despite the chaos. The Omega has been secured as you ordered. Good. The word tasted like ash in Theron's mouth. The execution order has been posted. Dawn, 3 days hence. Dax paused. Corvus is handling the arrangements personally. Something dark twisted in Theron's gut at the mention of his advisor, but he forced it down. Also good. Is it? Dax stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're tearing yourself apart. I'm fine. You've destroyed half your chambers. I'll destroy the other half if I choose, Theron snarled. I'm the Alpha King. I do as I please. Then why? Dax asked quietly, dangerously. Do you please to kill your own mate? The mate bond flared at the word, sending pain lancing through Theron's chest so acute he actually staggered. He caught himself against the wall, breathing hard, fighting the overwhelming urge to run to the dungeons, to that cell, to her. Kira. Her name was Kira. He'd heard someone say it. Kira Ashlyn, 22 years old, Omega class, resident of the Hollows. Unmarked, unclaimed, working 3 jobs to support her younger sister after their parents died in a rogue attack 2 years ago. He'd learned everything about her in the hours since the bond formed. Had demanded every scrap of information, told himself it was to build the case against her. But really, he just needed to know. Needed to understand how someone so small, so seemingly insignificant, had shattered 3 years of careful control with a single, defiant glare. She used dark magic, Theron insisted, the words automatic. The bond is false. You don't believe that. I have to believe that. The words exploded from him with such force that Dax actually stepped back. Because if I don't, if I accept that the goddess truly chose her for me, then everything I've done, Everything I've sacrificed to protect this kingdom means nothing. Silence fell between them. Theron could feel Dax's attention on him, steady and knowing. His beta had been with him since childhood, had seen him through the darkest period of his life. If anyone could understand, it would be Dax. But understanding didn't change reality. "Tell me about her," Dax requested finally. "Not the report. Tell me what you felt when the bond formed." Theron's jaw clenched. He wanted to refuse, to order Dax out, to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. But the mate bond pulsed with longing, and the words came, despite himself. "Peace," he whispered. "For the first time in 8 years, I felt peace." His hand rose unconsciously to his chest. She looked at me, really looked at me, not at the crown or the power or any of it. And she wasn't afraid. She was furious. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Called me a coward in front of the entire court. She wasn't wrong. Theron's head snapped up, the smile vanishing. "Careful, Beta." "Someone has to say it," Dax countered. "You've spent 3 years rejecting every woman presented to you because you're terrified of the bond, terrified of what happened to your father. But Kira isn't Lady Alara, and you aren't King Aldrich." The names hit like physical blows. Theron's father, the previous Alpha King, his mother, Lady Alara, the mate bond that had seemed perfect, destined, blessed by the goddess herself. Right up until the moment Lady Alara had used that bond to destroy King Aldrich from within, manipulated by enemies of the throne into poisoning her own mate slowly, driving him mad until Theron had been forced to watch his father deteriorate into a shell of himself before finally dying in agony. And the worst part? His mother hadn't even known she was being used. The enemy had exploited the mate bond itself, turning it into a weapon. By the time they'd discovered the truth, both his parents were dead, and Theron was left with a crown and a terror so deep it had shaped his entire reign. "The bond is a weakness," Theron declared flatly. "It can be exploited, used, turned against us. I won't risk it. I won't risk her." "So you'll kill her instead?" "She'll die anyway if the bond isn't severed. At least this way, it's quick. Clean. She won't suffer months of—" Theron's voice broke. He pressed his palms against his eyes, fighting for control. "She won't suffer what my father did. There are other ways," Marin claims. "Marin can say nothing." Theron whirled on his beta. "There is no other way. The bond can't be rejected without killing both parties, and it can't be completed without making her a target for every enemy I have. Those are the only options." "Then choose death together rather than apart," Dax responded simply. "At least that would be honest." Before Theron could respond, the mate bond suddenly flared with such agonizing intensity that he actually cried out, dropping to one knee. The pain wasn't physical. It was deeper, emotional. He felt Kira's terror, her despair, her. He was moving before thought, out the door, down corridors, driven by pure instinct. Guards scattered from his path. He took stairs 3 at a time, descended into the dungeons, following the golden thread connecting them until he stood outside her cell. The guard started to unlock it, but Theron stopped him with a gesture. Instead, he pressed his palm against the small window in the door, peering through. Kira sat in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried against them. Even from here, he could hear her crying, soft, broken sounds that tore at something in his chest. The bond sang at her nearness, the agony receding to a manageable ache. His hand trembled against the door. He could go in, could comfort her, could complete the bond and worry about consequences later. But then he saw it, a shadow moving at the far end of the corridor, someone watching, waiting. Corvus. The advisor stood in the darkness just beyond the torchlight, his expression unreadable. But Theron knew that look. had seen it 8 years ago, hovering at the edges while his father died. Always there, always helpful, always making suggestions that seemed so reasonable until you looked back and realized how much control you'd ceded. Theron's hand fell away from the door. He couldn't do it. Couldn't risk Kira becoming what his mother had been, a weapon turned against everything she loved. The bond might feel real, might feel right, but bonds could be manipulated. Love could be perverted into destruction. Better to end it quickly, better for them both. Your Majesty? The guard's voice seemed to come from very far away. Did you wish to see the prisoner? No, Theron responded, his voice hollow. He turned away from the cell, from Kira's soft crying, from the bond that screamed at him to stay. I've seen enough. He walked past Corvus without acknowledgement, feeling the advisor's satisfied smile even without looking. Made it halfway up the stairs before the mate bond flared again, so powerfully his knees buckled. He caught himself on the stone wall, breathing hard, tasting blood where he'd bitten his tongue. Through the bond, he felt the exact moment Kira's crying stopped. Felt her awareness of him, sharp and clear despite the distance. She knew he'd been there, knew he'd walked away. The betrayal that flooded through the mate bond was worse than any physical pain. Theron closed his eyes, letting it wash over him, accepting it as his due. He was a coward. She'd been right about that. Right about everything. But at least his cowardice would keep her alive, even if neither of them would ever be whole again. 2 days passed in the dungeons like an eternity compressed into moments. Kira drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams, her body burning from the incomplete bond. Marin came when she could, bringing water Kira couldn't keep down, herbs that did nothing to ease the supernatural agony tearing her apart from the inside. He's dying too, Marin whispered on the second night, bathing Kira's forehead with a cool cloth. Dax tells me the Alpha King hasn't left his chambers. Won't eat, won't sleep. Just sits and stares at nothing. Good, Kira managed through cracked lips. The word held no conviction. Even hating him, even knowing he'd condemned her to death, she couldn't stop the bond from crying out for him. Her traitorous heart still yearned for a man who'd chosen pride over their lives. It's not good. If you die, he dies. The kingdom will be thrown into chaos. Corvus will... Marin caught herself, glancing toward the door where guards stood watch. Corvus will what? Kira asked, forcing herself to focus despite the fever clouding her mind. But Marin just shook her head, fear plain in her expression. Rest now. Save your strength. For what? Kira wanted to ask. For the execution? For the moment when they drag her to the courtyard and end this suffering? But she was too tired to form the words. That night, she dreamed. But these weren't the fevered nightmares that had plagued her. These felt different. Real. She stood in a moonlit garden, the air sweet with night-blooming jasmine. And there, beneath an ancient oak, stood Theron. He looked worse than she felt. His mercurial eyes were ringed with shadows, his jaw covered in stubble, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. When he saw her, something broke in his expression. Kira. Her name on his lips sent warmth cascading through the bond. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Is this real? She took a step toward him, then stopped. Or am I dying and hallucinating? I don't know. His laugh was bitter, broken. Maybe both. The bond, when we sleep, it creates a bridge, a place where we can meet. He lifted his hand as if to touch her, then let it fall. I shouldn't be here. Shouldn't give you hope when there is none. Then why are you... Because I'm selfish. The admission seemed torn from him. Because even knowing I'm killing us both, I can't stay away. Because you're dying and it's my fault and I... His voice cracked. I can't breathe without feeling you suffer. Kira wanted to rage at him, to scream about the injustice of it all, but looking at his face, seeing the genuine anguish there, she found she didn't have the strength for anger anymore. Tell me why, she requested instead, not the lies about dark magic, the real reason you won't accept the bond. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, words pouring out as if a dam had broken. He told her about his father, about the mate bond used as a weapon, about watching the strongest man he knew reduced to a paranoid shell who saw enemies in every shadow. About his mother's horror when she realized what had been done to her, how the bond had been corrupted, turned into a channel for poison both physical and mental. She killed herself, Theron revealed, his voice hollow. After he died. Couldn't live knowing she'd been the instrument of his destruction, even though it wasn't her fault. Even though she never knew. His stare met Kira's. The bond killed them both. And I swore on their graves, I would never let it happen to me. Understanding crashed over Kira like a wave. You're not afraid of the bond itself. You're afraid of what others could do with it. I have enemies everywhere. Wolves who want the throne, who see any weakness as an opportunity. If they knew about you. He stepped closer, and she could feel his breath against her face. They would use you to destroy me, and I couldn't survive watching another person He stopped, the unspoken word hanging between them. Love. He'd almost said love. So you chose to destroy me yourself, Kira finished softly. That's not protection, Theron. That's just another kind of cowardice. He flinched as if she'd struck him. I know. Then change it. Stop the execution. Complete the bond. We'll face whatever comes together. You don't understand the forces at play here. Corvus quote. Is not your beta. Is not your friend. Why do you trust him? Theron's expression shuddered. He's served the crown for 20 years. He's the one who uncovered the plot against my father. Too late to save him, Kira interrupted, a sudden chill running down her spine. Theron, what if... But before she could finish the thought, the dream shattered like glass. Kira gasped awake in her cell, her heart pounding. Morning light streamed through the high window. The last morning. Tomorrow was her execution day. Kira? Lyra's voice came from the neighboring cell, hoarse from crying. Are you awake? I'm here, Kira called back, pushing herself upright despite the way her body screamed in protest. The mate bond felt different now, stretched so thin it was nearly transparent. In a day's time, when they took her life, it would snap completely. And Theron would follow her into death. At least they'd die together, even if apart. At least his suffering would end too. It was small comfort, but it was all she had. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Kira's breath caught. Was it time already? But these steps were lighter than the guards. Familiar. Marin appeared at the cell door, her face grim. Behind her stood Dax and someone else. Someone hooded and cloaked. We're getting you out, Marin announced without preamble. Both of you. What? How? No time for questions. Dax was already unlocking the door. The execution is scheduled for dawn tomorrow. That's less than 12 hours. We need you gone before then. The hooded figure stepped forward, pushing back their hood. Kira gasped. It was Celine Vorath, the noblewoman Theron had rejected in the ceremony. Don't look so shocked, Celine remarked dryly. I may be vain, but I'm not stupid. Corvus Dane has been poisoning this kingdom for years, and if the Alpha King dies without an heir, Corvus will seize power. Your bond might be inconvenient, but it's legitimate. That makes you a threat to his plans. I don't understand. Corvus orchestrated this entire situation, Dax interrupted. The presentation of your sister. Your defiance, the bond forming publicly so he could claim witchcraft. He's been maneuvering to get rid of Theron for years, but the king's refusal to bond made him vulnerable to different attacks. This was his chance to force a crisis. Then we have to tell Theron. We tried. Merrin confessed quietly. He won't listen. His grief over his parents blinds him to the truth. Corvus has made himself indispensable, and Theron can't see that the same advisor who uncovered the plot against King Aldrich was probably the one who orchestrated it in the first place. The implications hit Kira like a physical blow. We have to stop him. We will, Selene affirmed grimly. But first, we get you and your sister to safety. There's a safe house in the Northern Territories. You'll hide there while we gather evidence against Corvus. And Theron? The three of them exchanged glances. We'll die within days of your death, Dax admitted flatly. The bond won't let him survive it. But maybe his death will finally open the kingdom's eyes to Corvus's treachery. Number. Every fiber of Kira's being rejected that outcome. She'd felt Theron's anguish in that dream, understood the fear that drove his actions. He was wrong, stubborn, infuriatingly self-sacrificing, but he didn't deserve to die, and neither did she. There has to be another way, Kira insisted. There isn't, Marin replied sadly. Now come. We're out of time. But as they led her from the cell, as Lyra was freed and they moved through secret passages in the dungeon walls, Kira's mind raced. The tunnels beneath the keep were ancient, Dax explained as they hurried through darkness, built centuries before Corvus's time. The advisor had never studied the old blueprints, too arrogant to think he needed to know the bones of this place. But Dax had memorized every passage. She'd defied an Alpha King once before, changed the course of both their lives with a single moment of courage. Maybe it was time to be defiant again. The safe house was actually a forgotten wine cellar beneath an abandoned estate on Moonspire's northern border. Dax had led them through a maze of tunnels that emerged into the musty darkness of barrel-lined walls and cobweb-draped corners. You'll be safe here until nightfall, he announced, lighting torches that cast dancing shadows across stone. Then we move you north properly, away from the capital. What about the execution? Lyra asked, her voice small and frightened. When they find Kira gone, Corvus will rage, but he can't do anything without revealing his own involvement, Selene explained, arranging blankets in a corner. Despite her noble bearing, she worked with efficient practicality. He's been so careful to maintain plausible deniability. Public escape makes him look incompetent, not cunning. Kira barely heard them. She sat against the cold wall, feeling the mate bond stretch thinner with each moment away from Theron. The pain had become a constant companion, a burning in her chest that made breathing difficult. How long? She asked Marin, who was checking her pulse with a frown. Until what, child? Until the bond kills me anyway. Marin's silence was answer enough. Days, Dax acknowledged quietly. Maybe a week if you're strong. The link won't survive this distance and rejection for long. He crouched before her, his weathered face kind. I'm sorry. We're buying time, not saving your life. But maybe in that time, we can save the kingdom. By letting your Alpha King die too. Kira's laugh was bitter. Some salvation. He made his choice. Based on lies. Kira pushed herself upright, ignoring the way the room spun. You claim Corvus orchestrated this, that he probably killed Theron's parents too. Does Theron know? Really know? He suspects, I think, Dax admitted, but suspicion isn't proof. And Corvus has spent 20 years making himself irreplaceable. Every advisor, every council member, every guard captain, Corvus either placed them or has leverage over them. The kingdom is a web with him at the center. Then we need to cut the spider out. With what evidence? Selene moved closer, her expression troubled. I've been investigating Corvus for 2 years, ever since my own father died under suspicious circumstances. The man is meticulous. Every trail leads nowhere. Every witness disappears or recants. He's untouchable. Kira's mind raced, trying to think past the pain and fever. There had to be something, some crack in Corvus's armor. And then she remembered. The dream. Theron's words. The bond, she ventured suddenly. Corvus knows about mate bonds. Has to if he used one to kill the previous king. That kind of knowledge isn't common. You think he studied them? Marin's eyes sharpened with interest. More than studied. He'd need detailed knowledge to corrupt one, to turn it into a weapon. That means research. Books. Notes. Evidence. Kira looked between them. Where would someone like Corvus keep that kind of information? His private study, Dax offered slowly, in the keep's western tower. But it's warded, guarded. I've never been allowed inside, and I'm the beta. Then we break in, Kira proposed. That's suicide, Celine protested. Even if we got past the guards, the wards. Are designed to keep wolves out, Marin interrupted, her expression calculating. But Kira isn't a wolf. Not fully. She's Omega. Weaker in power, yes, but also harder to detect magically. The wards might not register her at all. Might? Lyra's voice rose in panic. You want to send my sister into the most dangerous place in the kingdom on might? I want to send her nowhere, Marin stated firmly. But the girl has a point. If evidence exists, it's there, and time is running out for all of us. Kira felt the mate bond pulse weakly, as if even that link was fading. Somewhere in Moonspire Keep, Theron was dying by inches, and in a few hours, Corvus would discover her escape and accelerate whatever plan he had in motion. How do we get back into the keep? She asked. Dax and Marin exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them, and Dax's shoulders slumped in resignation. There's a way, he conceded, but you won't like it. 2 hours later, Kira found herself in a laundry cart, buried under soiled linens that reeked of sweat and worse. The cart jolted over cobblestones as Dax wheeled it through Moonspire's servants' entrance, trading jovial insults with guards who knew him well enough to wave him through without inspection. Almost there, he murmured, too quietly for anyone but Kira to hear. Western Tower, service entrance. When I stop, count to 10, then slip out and up the stairs. 3rd floor, red door. That's Corvus's study. The cart stopped. Kira counted, then moved, her weakened body protesting every movement. But adrenaline pushed her forward. She emerged into a dim corridor, pressed herself into shadows, and climbed. The keep felt different in daylight. Less grand, more lived in. Servants bustled past, too focused on their duties to notice one more figure in worn clothes. Kira kept her head down, her heart hammering as she climbed stairs that seemed endless. 3rd floor, red door. No guards visible, but Marin had been right about the wards. Kira could feel them even without magical training. A pressure in the air, a warning that screamed wrongness. They'd fry any wolf who tried to pass. She reached for the handle and pushed through. The wards flickered but didn't trigger. Omega magic, or lack thereof, had granted her passage. Inside, Corvus's study was everything she'd expected and worse. Shelves lined every wall, filled with books and scrolls that radiated age and power. A massive desk dominated the center, its surface covered in papers and curious instruments, and along the far wall, locked behind glass, were bottles of liquid that glowed with the same sickly silver-black she'd seen in descriptions of the poison that killed King Aldrich. Moon goddess, Kira breathed. He'd kept it. Kept the very poison he'd used. either as trophy or tool for future use. She moved to the desk, rifling through papers with trembling hands, bills of sale, correspondence with nobles, nothing immediately damning. Then her fingers found a leather journal, its cover embossed with a symbol she didn't recognize. She opened it and felt her blood chill. Dates, names, methods of death or manipulation. It was all there, 20 years of treachery laid out in Corvus's precise handwriting, the plot against King Aldrich, the corruption of Lady Alara's bond, bribes paid, threats made, enemies eliminated. And there, near the end, a new entry dated 3 weeks ago. The young king remains stubbornly unbonded. New strategy required. If a bond can be forced into public formation and then corrupted, the kingdom will accept his death as tragedy rather than assassination. The Ashland girl shows promise. Defiant nature will ensure public confrontation. Arrange sister's presentation to provoke response. Kira's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the journal. He'd planned it all. Every moment from Lyra's capture to Kira's defiance had been orchestrated. Corvus had known she'd intervene, counted on it, used her own protective instincts as a weapon. Looking for something? She spun. Corvus stood in the doorway, his expression mild, almost amused. Behind him, 2 guards blocked the exit. "Clever girl," he remarked, stepping inside. "I wondered if you'd figure it out. Must admit, I didn't expect you to escape the dungeons quite so efficiently. Dax's work, I assume? I'll have to deal with him later." Kira clutched the journal to her chest. "Theron will know. When he sees this." "Theron sees nothing I don't show him," Corvus interrupted. "The boy is drowning in guilt and grief. So easy to manipulate, just like his father." He moved closer and Kira backed against the desk. "You should have stayed in that cell, little Omega." Died quietly. "Now I'll have to get creative. The bond will reveal the truth when you kill me. He'll feel it through our connection." "Will he?" Corvus's smile widened. "Or will he simply feel you die and assume it's his rejection finally completing its work? Grief makes people stupid, child. I've built an empire on that truth." He gestured to the guards. "Take her to the Eastern Tower. The old execution chamber. We'll stage it as suicide. Couldn't bear the shame of rejected mate bond. Threw herself from the window. Tragic. Romantic even." The guards moved forward. Kira looked frantically for escape, but there was none. Her weakened body, the bond draining her life force, the guards between her and freedom. She was trapped. Then the mate bond suddenly flared in her chest, stronger than it had been in days, bright and burning and furiously alive, and through it, she felt him. Theron knew she was here, in danger, and he was coming. The study door exploded inward with a force that sent splinters flying. Theron stood in the wreckage, his eyes blazing silver gold with alpha power, his entire body radiating lethal intent. "Step away from her," he snarled at Corvus. "Now." For the first time since Kira had met him, Corvus's composure cracked. Just for an instant she saw fear flicker across his face. Then he smiled. "Your Majesty. How wonderful. This saves me so much trouble." He gestured, and the guards moved, not toward Kira, but toward Theron. "You see, I couldn't have killed you directly. Too obvious. But dying to save your mate from her own treachery? That's the kind of tragedy that makes legends." The guards attacked in perfect synchronization. Theron moved like lightning, but he was still weak from the bond's rejection, still dying by inches. He took down one guard, but the other's blade scored across his ribs. "Stop!" Kira screamed. She thrust the journal forward. "It's all here. Everything you've done. Theron, he killed your parents. Planned this whole thing." Theron's stare snapped to the journal, then to Corvus. Understanding dawned on his face, and with it, a rage that made the air itself tremble. "You," he breathed. "All along, it was you." "Of course it was me," Corvus admitted, his mask finally dropping completely. "Your father was weak. You're weaker. This kingdom needs real leadership, not some boy who's afraid of his own shadow because of traumas I orchestrated." He pulled a vial from his pocket, that silver-black poison. "But don't worry. Your suffering ends today. Both of you." He moved toward Kira with supernatural speed. Theron roared, lunging to intercept, but the remaining guard blocked his path. Corvus's hand closed around Kira's throat, the vial at her lips. The mate bond screamed in her chest. She felt Theron's terror, his desperation, felt him pour everything he had into reaching her. And in that moment, something inside Kira broke free. Not the bond, something older, deeper. Power she'd never known she possessed, dormant until this moment of absolute need. Her eyes blazed gold. The Omega who shouldn't have power, who'd been dismissed as weak and worthless, reached inside herself and found the truth Corvus had overlooked in his careful planning. She was Theron's true mate, and true mates could share everything, including power. Kira's hand shot up and closed around Corvus's wrist. Alpha strength flooded through her, channeled from Theron through their bond, amplified by desperate love. She squeezed, and bones snapped like twigs. Corvus screamed. The vial shattered on the floor, its poison hissing as it ate through stone. "You're wrong," Kira declared, her voice resonating with power that shouldn't belong to an Omega. "Our bond isn't weakness. It's what makes us invincible." Corvus stumbled backward, cradling his shattered wrist, his face twisted with disbelief and pain. "Impossible. Omegas don't have alpha power. True mates do." Marin's voice came from the doorway, where she stood with Dax and a dozen palace guards loyal to the crown, not to Corvus. "When the bond is accepted and embraced." "You studied corruption of bonds, Corvus, but you never understood their true nature." Dax moved into the room, his sword drawn. "Corvus Dane, you're under arrest for treason, murder, and conspiracy against the crown." For a moment, Corvus looked like he might fight. Then his attention landed on the journal still clutched in Kira's hands, and something in him deflated. Without that evidence, he might have talked his way out. But 20 years of crimes, documented in his own hand? "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed to Theron, his voice venomous even in defeat. "I made you, shaped you. Everything you are is because of me." "No," Theron replied quietly, moving to Kira's side. "Everything I am despite you. There's a difference." As guards dragged Corvus away, his screams echoing down the corridors, Kira felt her legs give out. The surge of channeled power had burned through what little strength she had left. She collapsed, but Theron caught her, lowering them both gently to the floor. "I've got you," he murmured, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you now." "Took you long enough," Kira managed, but her voice was barely a whisper. The mate bond pulsed weakly between them. Stronger than before, but still incomplete. Still killing them both. "I'm an idiot," Theron confessed, and she felt wetness on her face, his tears falling into her hair. "A stubborn, terrified idiot who nearly destroyed us both." "Yes," Kira agreed. "You are." He laughed, the sound broken. "Marin, how long does she have?" The healer knelt beside them, her expression grave. "Hours. Maybe less. The bond is too damaged, and she's expended too much energy. Theron, you need to complete it now, or we both die," Theron finished. He cupped Kira's face, forcing her to meet his stare. "I need you to understand something. If we complete this bond, you become a target. Everyone who wanted my father dead will want you dead, Every enemy I've made will try to use you against me. Your life will never be simple or safe again. Sounds terrible, Kira responded. When do we start? I'm serious. The danger. Do you really think I don't know about danger? Kira interrupted, finding strength from somewhere deep inside. I'm an Omega who defied an Alpha King in front of his entire court. I broke into the most feared advisor's study and found evidence that brought him down. I've been sentenced to death, escaped execution, and channeled alpha power I shouldn't possess. She smiled, fierce despite her weakness. I think I can handle your enemies. Theron stared at her, and Kira watched emotions war across his face. Fear, hope, wonder, and finally, acceptance. You're extraordinary, he breathed. I don't deserve you. No, Kira agreed, but you're stuck with me anyway. That's how mate bonds work. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, claiming, a seal and a promise, and an apology all at once. The mate bond flared between them, no longer painful but warm, right, settling into place like a key in a lock. But it wasn't enough. The damage was too severe. The rejection had lasted too long. Theron, Marin urged, the claiming bite. You have to complete it properly. Kira felt him tense. She knew what he was thinking. What if he lost control? What if he hurt her? I trust you, she stated simply. Those 3 words seemed to break something in him. Theron buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, and Kira felt his canines lengthen. This was it, the true claiming, the point of no return. Mine, Theron growled against her throat. Yours, Kira confirmed. Now stop being dramatic and bite me already. He did. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it transformed almost instantly into something else entirely. Pleasure crashed over her in waves as the mate bond exploded to life, no longer thin and aching but brilliant and whole. She felt Theron's mind brush against hers, felt the walls he'd built around his heart crumble, felt the full force of his emotions. Love, fierce and overwhelming and absolutely certain. He loved her, had loved her since that first moment of defiance, when she'd looked at him and seen not a king, but a man. Had fought it because he loved her enough to think death was better than the danger his life would bring. Idiot, she thought fondly. I know, came his response directly into her mind. I'm working on it. The bite sealed, and Theron pulled back, his silver eyes now ringed with gold. Kira knew hers must look the same, mate-marked, bond complete, utterly transformed. How do you feel? Marin asked. Kira took inventory. The pain was gone. The burning in her chest had been replaced by a warm, steady presence that she knew was Theron. Her body still felt weak, but it was the weakness of exhaustion, not dying. Alive, she answered. I feel alive. Theron helped her stand, keeping one arm around her waist. We need to address the court. Corvus's arrest will cause panic. The nobles need to see us united, need to understand. That their king finally found his match? Dax interjected, grinning. I think they'll figure it out when they see the claiming marks. Kira's hand flew to her neck, feeling the tender spot where Theron's bite had sealed their bond. By werewolf law, she was now his mate, his Luna Queen, an Omega Luna Queen, the first in recorded history. They'll never accept it, she murmured quietly. The nobles, the council, I'm nobody. Worse than nobody. You're mine, Theron declared firmly. That makes you everything. He turned to Dax. Summon the court. All of them. We do this now, before anyone has time to plot against it. As they prepared to leave the study, Lyra burst through the door, Celine trailing behind her. Kira! You're alive. I felt it when the bond completed. It was like lightning across the whole city. Kira caught her sister in a fierce hug. I'm okay. We're okay. Better than okay, Celine observed, though her expression was troubled. But the lady has a point about the nobles. They're not going to simply accept this without a fight. You've upended centuries of tradition. Then let them fight, Theron proclaimed, his voice carrying an edge of alpha command that made everyone straighten. I've spent 3 years letting fear rule me, letting Corvus manipulate me. No more. He looked at Kira, and the love in his stare made her breath catch. I choose her. I choose us. And anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. The mate bond hummed with approval, with rightness. This was what they were meant to be. Not separate, not weakened by distance or fear, but united. Stronger together than apart. Then we'd better make one hell of an entrance, Kira suggested. As they walked through Moonspire Keep toward the Grand Hall, Kira felt eyes on them from every corridor. Servants whispered. Guards stared. Word was already spreading. The Alpha King had claimed an Omega. The impossible had happened. And they were either about to change history or start a civil war. Possibly both. The Grand Hall fell silent as Theron and Kira entered. Every noble in Silvercrest had been summoned, and they filled the space with hostile curiosity. At the center stood an empty dais, recently cleaned of Corvus's blood, Kira noted grimly. They know about Corvus? She murmured to Theron. Dax told them enough. That he was arrested for treason. The details can wait. His hand tightened on hers. Ready? No, Kira thought. But she nodded anyway. They ascended the dais together. The mate bond pulsed steadily between them, lending Kira strength she didn't quite feel. Below, hundreds of eyes watched, judging, calculating, hostile. 3 days ago, Theron began, his voice carrying to every corner. I ordered the execution of my true mate. Gasps and whispers erupted. He waited for silence before continuing. I did this out of fear. Fear that the bond would be used against me as it was against my father. Fear that made me blind to the real enemy, Corvus Dane, who orchestrated my parents' deaths and has been manipulating this kingdom for 20 years. The whispers grew louder. Theron gestured, and guards brought forward the leather journal, holding it up for all to see. Evidence of his crimes. Every murder, every manipulation, every betrayal, documented in his own hand. Theron's look swept the crowd. Including the plot that forced my mate's presentation, hoping to create a crisis that would end with my death. But she's Omega, someone shouted. Kira recognized the voice. Lady Celine's cousin, another noble with designs on the throne. The Alpha King cannot mate an Omega. It's against all tradition. Tradition, Theron stated coldly. Put Corvus in power and nearly destroyed us all. Perhaps it's time for new traditions. The goddess chooses mates. Marin stepped forward, her voice carrying supernatural weight. As the eldest healer, her word carried authority even nobles couldn't dismiss. Not tradition, not politics. The goddess chose this bond, formed it despite every obstacle, and strengthened it through trials that would have killed lesser pairs. To reject it is to reject her will. She's too weak, another voice called. What kind of Luna Queen can't even shift? Can't defend the pack? Kira felt Theron tense beside her, felt his alpha power rising in response to the insult. But she placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. You're right, she acknowledged, stepping forward. I am weak. By every traditional measure, I'm unqualified to stand here. I can't shift into wolf form. I have no noble blood, no training in statecraft or warfare. She paused, meeting eyes throughout the crowd. But I've done something none of you could. I survived rejection by my true mate. I uncovered a conspiracy you all missed. And I stood before an Alpha King and called him a coward when he needed to hear truth more than flattery. Silence greeted her words. The question isn't whether I'm strong enough for this position, Kira continued. It's whether you're brave enough to accept a Luna Queen who will always tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Celine stepped forward, and Kira tensed, expecting more opposition. Instead, the noblewoman knelt. I acknowledge Kira Ashlyn as true mate to Alpha King Theron Valdris, Celine proclaimed formally, and I pledge my house's loyalty to the crown. Dax was next, followed by Marin. One by one, nobles began to kneel, some reluctantly, some with genuine respect in their expressions, but not all. Nearly a third of the assembled nobles remained standing, their faces hostile. We cannot accept this, one elder declared. An Omega Luna violates every law of succession. If the king dies without a viable heir, then name one noble here who could challenge me, Theron interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. One wolf brave enough to face me in ritual combat for the right to question my choice of mate. The standing nobles exchanged glances. Challenging an Alpha King was legal, but it was also usually fatal. Theron was the strongest alpha the kingdom had seen in generations. We don't question your strength, Majesty, the elder responded carefully. But the bond itself is suspect. How do we know it's real? That she hasn't used magic to fake? Enough. Marin's voice cracked like thunder. You want proof? Then we'll give it to you. Tonight is the blood moon, the night when pack bonds are strongest, when truth cannot be hidden. She turned to Theron and Kira. I propose a public completion ritual. Let the entire kingdom witness the bond's legitimacy. Kira's stomach dropped. She'd heard of blood moon rituals, sacred ceremonies where mates completed their bond before the pack. Private usually, but occasionally made public when legitimacy was questioned. It's dangerous, Dax protested. The ritual leaves them vulnerable. If anyone wanted to attack, then they'd be declaring war on the goddess herself, Marin affirmed firmly. Even our most skeptical nobles wouldn't dare. She looked at Kira. But the choice is yours, child. The ritual is intense. Not painful, but exposing. Your bond will be laid bare for all to see. Every emotion, every memory, every truth between you. Kira looked at Theron, found him already watching her. Through the mate bond, she felt his concern, his desire to protect her from this additional trial, but she also felt his certainty that this was their best path forward, the only way to silence doubt completely. We do it, Kira decided, tonight. Hours passed in preparation. As the sun set and the blood moon began to rise, carriages and horses carried thousands from the city to the sacred grove. By the time darkness fell completely, the clearing was packed with every wolf who could make the journey. The Starfall Grove lay outside the city, an ancient clearing where the first wolves had gathered centuries ago. Thousands stood among the trees, watching as Theron and Kira were led to the center by Marin and a circle of elder healers. The blood moon hung huge and crimson overhead, painting everything in shades of red and shadow. The ritual is simple, Marin explained, drawing symbols in the earth around them. You'll stand in the circle as the moon reaches its peak. Your bond will manifest visibly, and the pack will witness its truth. She paused. But understand, if the bond is false or corrupted in any way, the blood moon will reject it. The backlash could kill you both. It's real, Theron affirmed. Then you have nothing to fear. The healers withdrew, leaving Kira and Theron alone in the circle. Around them, thousands of eyes watched. Kira could feel their judgment, their doubt, their hope. Some wanted them to succeed. Others wanted them to fail, to prove their suspicions correct. Scared? Theron murmured. Terrified, Kira admitted. You? Absolutely. He took her hand. But I'd rather die here with you than live another day without you. The moon reached its peak, and the ritual began. Light exploded from where they stood, golden and brilliant and pure. The mate bond became visible, a shimmering thread that pulsed with life. But it wasn't just light. Images formed in the air around them, memories pulled from their souls. Kira in the grand hall, chin lifted in defiance, Theron's shock and wonder as the bond formed. Their separation, the agony on both faces, the dream garden where they'd confessed truths. Corvus's study, the moment she'd channeled Theron's power. The claiming bite, sealing them forever. And emotions, so strong they seemed to have weight. Love, trust, fear overcome, strength found in unity. The pack gasped. Some wept. Because they could feel it too. The truth of the bond, its depth and power, undeniable under the blood moon's light. Then something else appeared in the light. A figure, translucent and ethereal, formed from moonbeams. The moon goddess herself, or as close as mortals could perceive. She touched Kira's forehead, then Theron's. And when she spoke, her voice was everywhere and nowhere. This bond is blessed. This union is sacred. Let none challenge what I have joined. The figure faded, the light dimmed. And when Kira and Theron stood in the circle once more, something had changed. Kira felt it immediately, power, real power, flowing through her. Not channeled from Theron this time, but her own. The goddess's touch had awakened something dormant, gifting her with abilities that transformed her from Omega into something else entirely. What? She looked at her hands, saw them glowing faintly with golden light. True mate, Marin breathed, wonder in her voice. Not just bonded, but blessed. The goddess has made you his equal in truth, not just in title. Around them, every wolf in the grove, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants, dropped to their knees, not in submission, but in recognition. Their Luna Queen had arrived. The aftermath of the blood moon ritual should have brought peace. Instead, 3 days later, it brought war. Southern border under attack. Dax burst into the strategy room where Kira and Theron were meeting with advisors. 2 noble houses, the ones who refused to kneel, have allied with rogue wolf packs. They're calling it a cleansing, claiming you've corrupted the kingdom with an unnatural bond. Kira felt a chill run through her. How many? 300 wolves, maybe more. They've taken 2 villages already. Dax's expression was grim. This is organized, planned. They've been preparing since the ceremony. Theron slammed his fist on the table, making maps and markers jump. They dare attack while hiding behind religious justification? They're claiming the blood moon ritual was fake, that we tricked the pack somehow. Dax glanced at Kira apologetically. Some are calling you a witch who's ensorcelled the king. The word witch hit like a slap. Kira had spent her life hiding her healing abilities, terrified of that exact accusation. Now it was being weaponized against her anyway. Then we prove them wrong, she stated, standing. We ride out and face them. Absolutely not, Theron responded immediately. You're not going into battle. It's too dangerous. I'm the Luna Queen. Where you go, I go. Kira met his look steadily. That's how this works now, remember? Partners. Equals. She felt his resistance through the mate bond, his desperate need to protect her. But she also felt the moment he recognized the truth, that sending her away while he fought would undermine everything they'd established. She couldn't be, both equal partner and delicate flower to be sheltered. You stay beside me, Kira countered, at all times. I agree, Theron conceded finally, though reluctance showed in every line of his body. They rode south with 200 loyal wolves, leaving the capital under Maren and Celine's protection. The journey took half a day, and with each passing hour, Kira felt tension building in her chest. Not fear, or not just fear. Something else. Power gathering. Waiting. They found the rebel forces camped in a valley, their position strong. At their head stood Lord Aldwin, the elder who'd opposed the bond most vocally. "Theron Valdris," Aldwin called across the field. "We offer you one chance. Denounce the false bond, put aside the Omega pretender, take a true mate of noble blood. Do this, and we return to peace." "And if I refuse?" Theron called back. "Then we remove you both. The kingdom deserves better than a king who's forsaken tradition for lust." Rage flared through the mate bond, Kira's and Theron's mixing until she couldn't tell which was which. She placed a hand on his arm, feeling him vibrate with barely contained violence. "Let me try something," she suggested quietly. "Kira, trust me, please." She rode forward alone, ignoring Theron's protest. The rebel wolves watched her approach with contempt clear on their faces. "Lord Aldwin," she announced, "you call me pretender. Witch. Unnatural. But what if I could prove my power comes from the goddess herself?" "There is no proof I would accept from Omega filth," Aldwin spat. "Then watch." Kira closed her eyes, reaching for the power the goddess had awakened during the blood moon ritual. She'd been practicing in secret, learning its contours, but hadn't yet shown anyone its full extent. She opened her eyes, and they blazed pure gold. Light erupted from her hands, but not the channeled alpha power she'd used against Corvus. This was different. Healing light, pure and radiant. She directed it toward the ground between the two forces, and where it touched, flowers bloomed. Not ordinary flowers, moonflowers, sacred to the goddess, blooming out of season and glowing with inner light. Gasps rippled through both armies. "The goddess blessed me," Kira proclaimed, her voice carrying with supernatural resonance. "Made me Luna not despite being Omega, but because of it. Because this kingdom needed someone who understands what it means to be overlooked, underestimated, cast aside." She looked at the rebel wolves. "How many of you have felt that way? How many of you fight for lords who see you as tools, not people?" Silence. Then, slowly, wolves in the rebel army began to lower their weapons. "Lies!" Aldwin roared. "She tricks you with magic. Kill her, kill them both." But only about 30 wolves moved forward, Aldwin's personal guard and the most fanatical followers. The rest stood frozen, doubt written across their faces. Theron's forces charged to meet the attack. Battle erupted in chaos of claws and fangs and blood. Kira found herself in the thick of it, her newfound power flowing through her in ways she barely understood. When wolves on either side fell wounded, her healing light touched them. Not choosing sides, healing all who needed it, even enemies. "What are you doing?" Theron demanded, fighting his way to her side. "They're trying to kill us." "And I'm showing them a better way," Kira replied. Aldwin broke through the melee, heading straight for her. His eyes were wild, fanatical. "You've corrupted everything. Die so this kingdom can be pure again." He lunged, claws extended. Theron roared, trying to intercept, but he was too far away. Time seemed to slow. Kira saw the attack coming, saw that she couldn't dodge, saw Aldwin's claws descending toward her throat. And the mate bond exploded with power. Light erupted from both Kira and Theron simultaneously, their powers merging through the bond into something greater than either possessed alone. The blast caught Aldwin mid-leap, didn't kill him, but threw him backward with such force he crashed into a tree 20 feet away and didn't get up. The battlefield froze. Every wolf stared at them, at the two figures surrounded by golden light, clearly blessed by forces beyond mortal understanding. Enough! Theron's voice rang with alpha command that could not be denied. The blood moon proved our bond legitimate. The goddess herself blessed our union. Yet still you attack. Why? Because change is terrifying, Kira added more gently. Because everything you've known says an Omega can't be Luna Queen, and accepting it means accepting that everything else you believe might be wrong too. She looked at the rebel wolves. But strength isn't about following tradition blindly. It's about having the courage to recognize truth even when it's uncomfortable. One by one, the rebel wolves began to kneel. Not all, some fled into the forest, refusing to accept defeat. But most bent the knee to their king and his Omega Queen. Lord Aldwin, conscious but broken, glared at them with undimmed hatred. "This isn't over," he rasped. "Others will rise. Others will be met with justice, not vengeance," Kira interrupted. "You'll stand trial for treason, but you'll live. That's the difference between your rule and ours." As guards took Aldwin away, Theron pulled Kira close. "You're terrifying," he murmured. "Do you know that?" "Good," Kira replied, leaning into him. "Maybe people will stop underestimating me." The ride back to Silvercrest felt different. Victorious, yes, but more than that, certain. They'd faced their first real challenge as king and queen, and emerged not just surviving, but stronger. The kingdom was learning what Kira and Theron already knew. Their bond wasn't a weakness to be exploited. It was the strength that would save them all. 3 months later, Kira stood on the balcony of Moonspire Keep, watching the sun rise over Silvercrest. So much had changed since that day she'd walked into the Grand Hall and defied an Alpha King. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned into Theron's warmth. Through the mate bond, she felt his contentment, his peace, emotions she'd once thought impossible for him. "The Northern Territories sent their formal pledge today," he murmured against her hair. "That's all 7 regions now. The kingdom is unified again." "Not everyone's happy about it," Kira pointed out. There were still pockets of resistance, wolves who would never accept an Omega Queen. But their numbers dwindled daily as Kira's rule proved itself wise, compassionate, strong. "No," Theron agreed. "But they'll learn. Or they'll leave. Either way, I'm not compromising. Not on us." Kira turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the claiming mark on his throat, mirror to the one he'd left on hers. "No regrets?" "Only that I wasted 3 years being afraid." He kissed her softly. "And that I almost lost you because of it." "But you didn't." "We found our way." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lyra burst in without waiting for permission, her face alight with excitement. "It's time. Marin says the pups could come any day now." Kira laughed, placing a hand over her slightly rounded belly where their children grew. Twins, Marin had confirmed last week. One would be Alpha, one Omega. A perfect balance, the healer claimed, blessed by the goddess. "We have weeks yet," Kira told her sister. "Stop trying to rush them." "I'm going to be an aunt." "I'm allowed to be excited." Lyra spun away, presumably to go spread the news to anyone who'd listen. Theron's hand covered Kira's on her belly. "Terrified?" he asked. "Absolutely," Kira admitted. "You. Beyond words." He grinned. "But we'll figure it out. Together. Together." The word that had saved them. That defined them. As the sun fully rose over their kingdom, painting the sky in golds and pinks, Kira felt the mate bond pulse with warmth and certainty. Their story had begun with defiance and rejection, with fear and near death. But it ended, or rather, continued, with love, with acceptance, with the understanding that the strongest bonds weren't the ones that came easily, they were the ones worth fighting for, and theirs had been worth everything. every moment of pain, every act of defiance, every impossible choice. Together, they had rewritten destiny itself. The Alpha King who'd rejected every woman had finally found his match, and the Omega who dared to defy him had become a queen.